Hello and welcome to the Buddha and the Coach vlog powered by Soul Performance Academy. I am your host, Dan Mickle. The Buddha and the Coach is a weekly vlog focused on looking at the teachings of the Buddha through a coaching light. The Buddha and the Coach is proud to be sponsored by ICN Athletics. It's called Normal Athletics. Makes the extraordinary ordinary through adaptive beach volleyball. Everyone should have the opportunity to enjoy and excel in the sport, and ICN offers the programs and the education to make it normal for adaptive athletes to play on any court. Help them make beach volleyball court a place for everybody. For more information or to make a donation to the 501c3 organization, please visit icnathletics.com. And again, thank you to everyone, John, Dave, and everyone else at It's Called Normal Athletics for their support and everything that they're doing. All right, episode 4, here we are. This week's teaching from Buddha is nothing ever exists entirely alone. Everything is in relation to everything else. Think about that. Just take 2 seconds and think about that. Nothing ever exists entirely alone. Everything is in relation to everything else. Seems pretty simple, right? The question becomes, let's look at this in multiple ways. We can't just fix something as a coach. It may seem simple. We are fixing a batter's swing. We are fixing the positioning of hands on a free throw. We are fixing the footwork on a serve in volleyball. Those all sound like simple fixes. The problem is everything else is related to that. So it may change other aspects. Maybe all of a sudden the batter is not explosive enough. Or maybe all of a sudden the basketball player can't play defense as quick or rebound as quick from their free throw because we changed the technique. Maybe our server can no longer hit spots on the court because we changed the technique. We have to remember that everything that we do, everything that exists, everything that we change, everything that we work on has effects on something else. And as a coach, we really need to look at that. Again, it's really simple to look at it in the sense of skills. Working on defense means less time to work on offense. Pretty simple, right? But I want to go beyond that. The more we're asking our athletes to do, the more time we're asking them to spend in the weight room, on mental training, means that we're taking it away from something else. And of course, if you remember last week's episode on the ego of the coach is going to say, well, of course, all those things are going to take away from court time and me teaching my players this sport. But what I'm talking about is we're practicing more, so we're taking away homework time, school time. So then our players end up struggling, and then they get more stressed out, and their performance actually goes down because they're stressed out about school, because we're taking away all their school time because we're practicing more. It has been really hard as a coach to realize it's okay to give your team off. Sure, we have our scheduled day off, but there's just times when you can see in your team that maybe we need to give up practice time, cut practice time early, because that's what's actually going to be best for the team. How many times have you scheduled a 2-hour practice and the last 30 minutes you're just struggling to do something because the team is checked out? What's the value in that? Because we're taking away time from something else. Maybe they could go home and do schoolwork and be less stressed and then come in mentally more prepared for practice the next day and be better performers. Everything is tied to everything else. In life, in practice, in skills, in matches, the decisions that we make have to affect something else. And that's what we need to think about. And again, I could go on a whole tirade about this in the skill sense or in the match sense, but I want to talk more about the mental health and the life aspect of not just the student athletes, but also the coaches. The more we coach, the less time we have for other things, family, hobbies, life, which means burnout's coming. And then whether we want to or not, we're stopping. Because life is going to shut us down. Our body's going to break down. Our mind's going to break down. Something's going to happen. Because we didn't look at the adverse sides of everything else that we were doing. What is something that you, as a coach, struggle with implementing or changing because you don't think about the consequences? Again, I use the example of giving a team off because you can just sense they've checked out. How many of you struggle with that? How many of you would be willing to let your team not practice the day before a big match or a big game because you know the value of the rest, and then being able to go home and maybe do schoolwork or just kind of decompress before the big game has more value than the 2 hours of just running the same drills and playing the same games over and over again before that big match? Honestly and truthfully, for me, that is when I felt that I got it. When I realized that there are just times when not being the coach and not being in the gym is what's best for me as the coach, what's best for them as a program. And again, this goes back the whole way to episodes 1 and 2 of this vlog about checking the egos and being open and having trust with one another. To know that, okay, I'm giving you this time off to kind of recharge for tomorrow's big game. You have to trust that your team is going to do that. Or you as the coach have to trust yourself that if you give yourself the night off, you're not going to go home and draw up plays or think of plans. You're just going to shut it down. Maybe focus on the family or focus on your regular full-time job or whatever else you're doing. We have to understand that what we're doing affects every aspect. And it can be just that whole snake eating its own tail, right? We practice more to get better. The more we practice, the more stressed out our players are getting because they don't have time for schoolwork or social life or the other things that keep them balanced. So then they come into practice and they're not as good as they should be. So what do? We practice more because they're not as good as they should be. When in essence, if we would just stopped it in the middle and said, hey, let's take a break and come back. I mean, we've all been there, right? We've all had that thing that we've tried, some skill, some task, something that we just couldn't get. We try and we try and we try. And then we just walk away from it. And the next time we do it, it happens. It's like it's magic. All of a sudden it's working. It's because we had time to balance it out. Our mind had time to think about it. And that's to the point that we have to get. We have to stop looking as coaches at just what we're doing on the field, on the court, on the pitch, on the diamond, in the pool, on the slopes. I think I hit them all there. We have to realize that things outside of our little atmosphere of sports affect our sports, affect our athletes. And we really have to understand that things that we do and the pressures that we put on affect our athletes, affect our communities. Be careful what we wish for. That's the saying, right? That's what we have to be careful for. We push them harder, Then they have breakdowns, and then they come in at a worse spot because they're stressed out about their other aspects of life. And you're going to lose players. You're going to have kids quit sports because it's not fun anymore. Because it's affecting other aspects of their life. So as you draw up your season plan and your big picture of what you're doing, think about what is this plan going to do for them, positive or negative, outside of my control. How many times have you had back-to-back games? We'll get through it. We'll be fine. We're tough. We're mentally tough. We're gritty. Nah, that negativity just goes into a deposit box, and eventually it comes due. And a withdrawal's coming, whether it's going to be a full withdrawal or maybe just a little bit. But they're going to shut down, or their body's going to shut down. Making a team run laps because they're being too noisy or not focused. I understand the aspect of discipline, but is that going to help your end product? I once watched a football practice where a team wasn't executing what the coach wanted, and it was like 102 degrees out. And the coach denied them water because he felt that they didn't deserve the water break because they weren't working hard enough. But they can't work hard enough because they're completely gassed out, dehydrated, and need water. So what's going to happen? Eventually they're going to break down, and it's going to be an issue. Now, luckily, there's been awareness about things like that. But it's even the little things, adding that extra practice before the big game. You can convince yourself all you want that, oh, we need to have this extra practice because this is a big game. It's a conference game. But what is it affecting? Well, guess what? Now that you have this extra practice, your star player can't study for their big English exam. And then they bomb their big English exam, and then they're stressed out and bummed about that. Do you think they're going to be at the best for you as a player? Probably not. Those are the things that we have to think about as a coach. So remember, teaching for, nothing ever exists entirely alone. Everything is in relation to everything else. Look at your actions and what they may cause. Look at what other actions may cause issues for you, and how are you going to address that with your team or your coaches. Again, I want this to be a dialogue, so make sure you hit the comments below. Tell me how bad I am. Tell me how much you love me. I don't care. I just want to have a discussion about all these issues. On the mental side, the physical side, everything, the whole athlete. That's what we need to talk about. So hit up the comments, share, like, subscribe, retweet, everything that you can possibly do. Let's start a bigger conversation about all this. And make sure you check out our friends at It's Called Normal Athletics, icnathletics.com. And remember, peace, love, don't suck, and see you next week.